All right, I think we'll get started, and as people kind of come in, we'll welcome them in. I asked Ron Masson if he'd be willing to go first, so thank you, Reverend Ron, for going first. Well, let's welcome him up here to share a reflection, some stories.
Well, Yvonne and I have been very close neighbors to Orfordville for 48 years. We came to Brodhead in 1970 and I served there for 28 years and have since been retired in Brodhead, so we're still very close neighbors. My involvement with Orfordville Lutheran Church was only as an interim, so my period of time is about this much in the 150 years of the congregation. But they were great years. I received a telephone call one morning from Synod office and said, we have a vacancy suddenly in Orfordville. Would you be willing to help out for 2 or 3 weeks? And I said, well, of course, I'm not doing anything right now. I had a little hiatus from helping out at Grace Lutheran in Monroe. And so 7 months later, I told the church council, my wife and I have plans to go to Arizona for the winter, so I will take you through Christmas and then you'll have to find somebody else. But it was a great time, and I thoroughly enjoy the people in Orfordville. You are a fine Christian congregation, and I've always admired the congregation from the very beginning when I started in Brodhead. And so I just want to thank all of you for this invitation, and bring you greetings again from Bethlehem Lutheran in Brodhead, and wish you the next 150 years will be as great. Thank you.
So I think our next speaker will be based on who's ready to take a break from eating. Bill Maines, would you be ready to speak? Looking around. Yeah. It looks like I caught you mid-bite. All right, good. All right, let's welcome Reverend Bill Maines.
I feel like I'm back in church again. There's nobody sitting in the front. What in the world? So, a couple of memories just to share with you. Some things that kind of happened as we went on. Kristen and Andy have been so kind to let Barb and I go through the parsonage. It is stunningly different and beautiful. Glenn was telling us about the work that was done there. Oh my goodness. I am so impressed. It really is a nice place. I appreciate it. I want you to know that my kids remember this parsonage really well. My kids used to do laps in the parsonage. Now, when you think about laps, you think about going around a track horizontally. Oh no. Oh no. They did vertical laps. They would go screaming up the front stairs, through the hallway, down the back stairs with that curve where you hit the wall, You got to hit the wall first, then down the stairs, you hit the cabinet, and then you go back through the house to the front stairs again. And they just keep going over and over and over. It was wonderful. They slept really well. Pretty cool. My kids were also involved in the lutefisk dinner. Now I will tell you, I came down here from Ulen, Minnesota. And in Ulen, there were lots of Norwegians up there too, I'm not Norwegian, I'm Irish. And so I was the Irish missionary to the Norwegians up there, and I saw a couple of names down here, and before the call, I said, oh, this would be better, it's not all Norwegian. Yeah, right. So I was the missionary to the Norwegians in 2 congregations in a row, and yes, my previous congregation had lutefisk dinners. I was hoping to avoid them. But my children helped. They would carry the platters in, you know, and one of our kids, I think was about 11 years old, Kate, and she took a platter and turned and started to come through the door, and someone else was rushing out the door. I'm not going to say why because I'm not sure, but anyway. And they got there, and she got bumped and started to lose this gelatinous mass. And she about freaked out. She was on her knees finally when she got the plate further under it and got it before it hit the floor. Well, there was an older gentleman sitting back in the back, in the cheap seats way back there. And he saw this, and he looked at her and said, just put the platter here. That guy ate 5 platters. Not 5 plates, 5 platters of lutefisk. I noticed that the lutefisk was being cooked in the back boiler room that was back in that corner. And I could still smell it out here, which for me as an Irish person is difficult. But I also noticed that it was cooked in the boiler room, and then I finally figured out why. There is not one stitch of paint on any of the bricks in the boiler room. You cooked lutefisk back there for so long, it stripped the paint right off the walls. So, anyway, speaking about Norwegian stuff, we had a woman, I believe her name was Olga, who turned 100 years old, and we had a gathering for her. I believe her circle and a few others came for her birthday in our fireside room. Now, I don't know how long that's been gone, but I remember where the fireplace is. That helps, because it was in that room. And one of the people said, well, she really would like to have you sing for her. I said, yeah, okay, I can do that. But that point, I've done a lot of singing, not the issue. I found out after I agreed to do it that she wanted me to sing a hymn in Norwegian. En stora vida flokker je. And she was very nice and accepted it graciously and said, thank you so much for doing that. And after the party was over, she got me alone and she said, it's the first time I've ever heard Norwegian sung with an Irish accent. There are some special people here in the congregation for us. And I'm going to embarrass the heck out of her, but that's too bad. She'll have to deal with it. Patty Burtness welcomed us with open arms in this congregation. We came down here, obviously not knowing a soul, you know. Come from northern Minnesota, where we actually saw 43 degrees below zero on the thermometer outside. And here we are now in southern Wisconsin. How do we deal with this? You know, how do we help change it? Patty really greased the wheels for us. She introduced us to all kinds of people. She became not only a neighbor, but a friend. And in fact, Patty, I have to tell you this. We had several people in the congregation who were absolutely convinced that the parsonage was their building and they could go into it and out of it whenever they wished to. They did not think that it was our home. And they did that. And it was kind of off-putting to us. I'll tell you right up front, it was really uncomfortable to have people just wander into the house. Okay? Patty is the only person in this congregation, and the only person in any congregation we have ever served, that we welcomed every time she just walked into the house. She didn't ring the doorbell. She didn't knock on the door. She'd open the door and yell, "Are you decent?" She and my wife became good friends. And frankly, Patty, thank you. Thank you. Because that welcome, we remember more than anything else, is how welcoming you were for us. I really appreciate that. So, two of the gals here that were members of the congregation that got married here came up to me and said, thank you for marrying us. We just celebrated our 30th anniversary. Jan Hoff and Kevin, although I cannot remember your last names.
Rehnquist.
Thank you. Say it again louder.
Ramquist.
Ramquist. Another good Irish name. Okay. Okay, so Jan did, and then Debbie Thorson did. And I don't remember her last name either. Okay? Thank you. They came up and said, thank you for this. The process we went through helped us out, all this kind of stuff. And that brought to mind the weirdest wedding I have ever had in my entire 45 years of ministry. The weirdest wedding. I went through the premarital process with this couple. And we practiced an open marriage kind of thing at that point, not open in the sense society thinks of it. Anybody who wanted to come here and get married could do that. And we would marry them and work with them and hopefully invite them to be part of the congregation as well. Got through all the premarital stuff, all the feedback sessions and that kind of stuff. We got down to about 2 weeks before the wedding was supposed to happen. And the bride started calling me about every day with changes that she wanted to have in the service. She'd call me and say, can we change the vows and make it this instead? Can we do this instead and do this instead? Oh, wait a minute, Pastor. One of the bridesmaids had to back out. Can we change the name of the person who's the bridemaid in this? One of the ring bearers apparently couldn't come. We need to change the ring bearer. All these things happen like almost every single day up until the Tuesday before the wedding. The Tuesday before the wedding, after 2 phone calls on Monday, she calls me up and she says, Pastor, I don't know how to say this. I know I've been bugging the heck out of you, but I've got to change one more thing in the wedding. And by this point, I have to admit, I was getting a little tired of the changes. Okay, Pastor, I know I've been a pain, but I need to change one more thing. All right. What do you want to change this time? I want to change the groom. Dead serious. She wanted to marry the best man instead of the guy she said yes to. Needless to say, I said, nope. The wedding is off. And that was it. So, okay. Lyle, I noticed in your book, there's a comment about CUP, the food pantry that's up here, and there's a comment that said it had been out in the community for quite some time, and we didn't know for sure when it came into the congregation. I will tell you for sure when it did. It was when I was here as pastor. Because I was part of the board at that point, talking to people about what CUP was doing. And they said, we're going to have to close. We have nowhere to put this. We can't afford this any longer. And I said, wait a minute. And I brought it back to council. I said, here's the choice, gang. Either we let it close, or we find another way to house it. And I think we can house it, and I think we've got a room for it. And so it happened under my tenure that they moved here. You can't fix the book, that's okay. But that little piece of tidbit trivia for you.
Well,
I know when it happened.
But I think the book says 83.
That's I think when it finally got here. I left in 82. Yeah, but no, matter of fact, no, it was earlier than that. It was earlier than that because my kids were helping to unload food packet trucks and things and taking them into the room back upstairs. Yeah, so. And then the other thing that happened while we were here, we started a preschool. And I have no clue how long the preschool lasted, but I know we started a preschool back there.
Early 2000s.
Is when it finally shut down?
When the high school, when the school system started preschool, and it shut down.
Okay, that would make sense. The school system started one. We had one here and felt it was important to teach little kids, not just, little things to make them smarter, but also teach them who Jesus was. And I think that's been the key behind Orphanville for a long time. This congregation is trying to tell the world who Jesus is. God bless you. Carry on.
John Nessett, do you want to go next? You ready? Let's welcome John Nessett to come and talk. You are the son of Pastor Nessett.
The population of Orphanville when we arrived in 1950 was 510.
Put the microphone closer. You talk into the...
Just be closer to the mic.
Yep.
Talk into it.
Yep, there you go.
The population of Orfordville when they arrived in 1950 was 510. And there were 6 of us in our family, and that brought it to 260 or 516. The families were pretty prolific in those days, and there were 32 kids on this block, just around here. And we, you know, intermingled and had great times playing games, baseball and football, and playing other games like Annie Iover and all that. And we went hiking down the tracks. I had a friend who I met in school, and we've been friends for ever since. And he my mind isn't working. Yeah, he and I would get on the go hunting elephants down the tracks with our BB guns and other big game, you know. It was all in our imagination, but we never quit talking and doing things together. I'm trying to think. Oh, there were steam locomotives that came to Orfordville in those days. There was a railroad siding and a what do you call it? Where they keep cattle for shipping. I can't remember. What? Stockyards, yeah, stockyards. And they would, you know, the train would come and pick them up, and there were passenger cars on the train also, and people from Orfordville would take the train either to Janesville or to Monroe and do some shopping or whatever, run errands, and then coming back they would ride on the return train in the afternoon. I'm trying to think. Oh, another thing was Scout Hill. It was a mile and a half west of town, just north of Highway 11. And there was a Boy Scout troop that met at the church here or at the parsonage basement. And we would, you know, plan things, and we camped a lot on Scout Hill. That was a favorite place to go. Gary Kessler was my friend, and he well, the way we met was in school. He was in 5th grade, I was in 4th grade, and both 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade were in one classroom. And the teacher one day, whose name was Miss Steele, she sent us to the blackboard with a box of colored chalk, because she recognized that we had artistic interests and were really showed promise, you know, and asked us, or instructed us to paint whatever, or draw whatever we wanted on the blackboard. And we talked about and decided on drawing a picture of two trains colliding head on. We were boys. And then we talk about details, you know, on the train to add to it. And one of them, Gary suggested we, you know, because of the sudden stop of the engine, what would happen to the cars behind it. And so we drew a picture of the cars flying into the air in a high arc, kind of, and then I suggested that we show the coal dropping out of the tenders onto the train, because they were up in the air. And we almost lived for camping. We went to Scout Hill every chance we had, and we talk about things. Gary, I don't think was he had no religious affiliation at that time, and I coaxed him to come to church, and he did, as a friend, you know, and he was a friend, and we always talked about stuff. He sang in the choir, even though he couldn't carry a tune. But there again, it was for me, you know, for friendship. And he went on to be, you know, I can't think of the word. When you study the Bible and it's for qualifying for communion.
Confirmation?
And what?
Confirmation?
Confirmation, yeah. Thank you. He went on to, an interesting thing about our relationship. We came here from Puget Sound in Washington, and when Gary, you know, when he left here, went on to school, and he became professor of religion and philosophy. And I of course, Gary's father was a meat cutter, and I ended up making a living as a meat cutter. And I stayed in the Midwest, and he went to, ended up, when he retired, about 40 miles north of where we lived on Puget Sound. And I asked a psychologist about that one time, and they said that is not unusual for close friends, very close friends, to do a switch of, you kind of become each other's alter ego. And yeah,
You got one more story, or?
no, I think that's,
Okay, well,
if I could go on till one sad note, my friend Gary is dying right now. He has cancer, untreatable. So, but we corresponded by internet, emails over the last 15, 20 years, almost every day. And I kept all his emails. Thank you.
well, I don't want to compete with Glenn from last night. You did such a good job. We've already booked him for the 175th and the 200th, so thank you for that.
Does that mean you're gonna be here for
Those are binding contracts. But I do know a couple Ole and Lena jokes, so I just got one I'm going to share with you, okay? So, Ole died in a tragic lutefisk accident. And so Lena went and met with the funeral director, and the funeral director was trying to get her to talk about Ole to write the obituary, and she just said, just put Ole died. And the funeral director said, no, you need at least 5 words. These newspapers, if you're worried about money, the newspaper will give you the first 5 words for free. And Lena thought about it for a little bit, paused, and finally she looked up and said, okay, you just put Ole died, boat for sale. Jessica, do you want to go next? Please welcome Jessica Jones.
Oh, I'm not nearly that tall. Like good sermon prep, I have no idea what I'm going to say. When I think about being in Orfordville, it's not what I did that I think about, because frankly, I'm still not sure what pastors do. It's this community and what its life is. And I guess the disruptive, cynical thing is to tell the history of a congregation in a string of clergy that walked through the place and said and did whatever is the clean, simple narrative, right? And makes sense. And clearly is impactful, right? Like, because you need someone to work at the church and to, proclaim the word and administer the sacraments. But that's not life. Like, life isn't these clean, simple narratives, It's this glorious, hot mess of wonder and excitement and lots of benign moments and trouble and difficulty. And, it's that which makes up 150 years is excruciating congregational meetings or boring council meetings. They're just like, it's hot in this basement, let's go. Like, we're like, and we know there's cake, let's have the cake. Who cares about the budget, right? But like, it's still important. But it's also what makes up this room. It's Courtney showing up in her volleyball gear to youth group and just like making us all look foolish over on the volleyball court. Or it's Bonnie showing up with pickled asparagus a few weeks after there's just been bags of asparagus like dumped on people's doorsteps around town by Dave. It's Mary and Janice teaching people to quilt in the basement here so that blankets can go out around the world. It's getting together and crying about people who've gone, sometimes quite suddenly, trying to sum up who they've been for us in a few minutes upstairs and some food down here, and then trying to reassemble life afterwards. That's the hot mess that makes 150 years. And that's what's the celebration. And there's not an easy way to tell that narrative, right? I mean, because like, you're the ones I happen to see in the room and can tell those, right? But it's so much more, and so many stories that none of us know. I guess once we got to the passing of the peace, because in good fashion, for those of you who know me, I showed up like on time. Not late. I'm real excited about that. And when we got to the passing of the peace, there was a number of folks that said, like, it's so good to see you, and like, you've been gone. Like, I haven't seen you for so long, right? Because my life has been glorious and a hot mess and often boring. And a lot of the past few years has been somewhat closed off, and I haven't seen a lot of people because I wasn't going out a lot. But walking in here today, nothing's changed. It's people who I love and who love me, and that's what makes a congregation continue to function despite the glorious messes of each of our lives. Because none of us have it together. And all, have the things we're anxious about or like hold too closely to ourselves. But then, there's a cup of coffee afterwards, or some okay wine and bread, that we all share together. And these things center us together, and it's that sort of love and grace that breaks through the fear and brokenness and mundanity of our lives. And so, a church that's around for 150 years doing that is glorious and wonderful. And this town is so much richer because there's a place like this where people can walk in and just be welcomed and loved. The way that we're all meant to be. And that's one of the huge proclamations that we make, is like, each of us actually matters. No matter what. It's not because we've earned it or because we're great or whatever. It's like, oh, you exist. Fantastic. You just matter. And that's alive here. So thank you for sharing that with Erica and I in our time here, and for continuing to do that for everyone who comes in here. To another 150.
Al Ness, do you want to come and share a story? Let's welcome Al Ness. And you were an interim pastor here in the, Reverend Al Ness, I should have said.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation to come and be with you. I certainly enjoyed the service. It was just very uplifting, and I just feel, encouraged by what's happening here. Most of us had read those things about Mark Twain, and as he got older, he said, I can't remember as well, but when I think back on my childhood, I can remember all the details very, very clearly, even if they didn't happen. We were here just, it really wasn't totally us. I live in Oregon with my wife, and so I just traveled here. I was working full-time at the school because at that time I was working for the synod, and you go out to a church for 3 months, 6 months, 3 years, whatever it is, and so I worked for the school also. It was a busy time, but I really, really enjoyed it. And often I think that when I like to hear about what's happening in the church, it's not what this person or that person, and people are important, and I'm very thankful for the people that do help us. But I'm most thankful for what God is doing in each parish. The one incident that is most clear and most meaningful to me at this parish is that I was teaching the kids about First Communion. Remember, there's a time back there that you couldn't have communion until you were confirmed, and then they said that you should move it up to 2nd grade, and a lot of people said, no, they're too young, they can't understand, Well, we got to a better understanding, I think, that communion is really about God, God meeting us. And I think Lutherans have it right when they say God is in and with the elements of bread and wine. That's really what's happened. That's what's important. That's where the power, that's where the life is. And so I was teaching that, and I had it in my mind. I thought that we came downstairs and we came into the room and the kitchen was off there. And I don't remember who was helping me, but I'm sure there was, because we met after school on Friday and had some good food. Good cooks here, yeah, thank you cooks. I appreciate good food. Thank you for today. But I remember as I was teaching on that, the presence of the Lord was just so real, absolutely real. You could just, sense and feel and think it. It wasn't just that we were talking about it. It wasn't just in our mind. It wasn't in the imagination that we believe that there's real presence in the communion. Like Presbyterians believe it's a remembrance. It's like a birthday. We as Lutherans have been taught as our understanding of Scripture is that God is in, with, and under communion. That touches me. And like I say, that was a moment, and I'll never forget in my lifetime, how the presence, the life of God was so real in this very building. And I don't know how many kids reacted to that. I wish I could remember who was helping me. I'd like to ask them, now looking back, I'd like to ask them, what was the encounter with God that night for you? Last week we were over in Owatonna at a parish over there, and they were celebrating basically 150 years. And so I shared with them one of the really important nights was a Christmas Eve service. That God just came and met us. We were worshiping and this and that, and then when we went to, greet one another, the presence of God just came and people started hug one another, and I think everybody got, like a half a dozen hugs. That didn't, we would kind of say hello and this, that, and greet one another, but not with any vitality in life. But that night, the presence of God is just so real. I thought, that's really the incarnation, isn't it? God with us. And last week I shared about, I had a call from this person Sunday afternoon. She said, Pastor, did you see what happened at communion? And I said, no, I didn't notice it. We're so busy trying to keep up and get done in an hour or so. And I was just passing out the bread and the wine. And she said, oh, I want to come in and talk to you about it. So she came in the next day after work. And she said, when you handed me the wafer, my hand turned real leathery, halfway up my arm to the elbow. And I thought, now, what book do I look for an answer for that besides the Bible? And the Lord just gave it to me, put it in my heart. Get out your communion kit, and I did that. I took out my communion kit, and I declared the bread and the wine, the words over it, and I took it off my communion kit, and as I handed it to her, her arm and her hand changed leathery right before both of our eyes. I won't forget that in this lifetime. God is real, and God can do whatever He wants to get our attention and to show us His power and His love and His grace and His mercy. God is a wonderful God. I remember when we used to go to Bible camp, and there's probably 180 kids there, and so we'd have sessions in the morning, and then afternoon was fun, and in the evening we had the sessions again. And then we would always have some pastors or some people to counsel and pray, because as the Spirit works, He will convict you, maybe this morning or maybe that night, or and so they have some convictions, and we had the counselors there, but oftentimes they wanted to talk to a pastor. So I remember this one girl from Minneapolis. She came and she said that she had been catering on the golf course. You were carrying the golf cart, caddying, not catering, caddying. I just like food too much of it. She was canning, but then she started to develop some problem with kidneys, and so she would have accidents. And you know, that would be embarrassing for any one of us, but you know, for a teenager, that's really serious. And so she said, you know, would you pray for me? So I remember praying for her. I don't remember her name, I don't remember, but I remember she was a thin girl, you know, and it was 3 weeks later, I was we were at Minneapolis in the auditorium. They said there were 75,000 people there. And as we got done with the morning session, we started to go down the steps, and all of a sudden I heard this voice, this feminine voice, saying my name. And so we stopped and we talked, and here comes this girl, and she said, God has healed me. I'm back catering. God is good. He wants to meet us wherever we are. And He wants to touch our lives, and He wants to change our lives. And it's through the power of the Holy Spirit. It says in Acts 1:8, you shall receive power when the Holy Spirit comes upon you. Folks, pray for the power of the Holy Spirit to be on you. Because I want to be changed, and it's my desire that you should be changed, because I want you to be in heaven with us. God is good. God is wonderful. You know, as you think about, I've conducted many funerals, and you know, so often they come up and say, oh, he looks so nice, or she looks so nice, or maroon is such a good color for her, you know. What would you like to have them say about you when they walk by the casket? Have you thought about that? I know what I'd like to have them say. Look, he's moving.
Now, Katie Qualley's offered to say a few words.
You can hear me okay? Yeah. Well, I wasn't going to say anything, but this is quite a crowd. So I'll be a bit concise. I grew up in Minnesota. My dad was Walter Qualley. He was born here. His father was Ole Jewell, who served 23, 24 years as pastor. After he ended here, Ole Jewell went to Benson, Minnesota, raised the family there, and then he was elected to Congress, and he served several terms. Then he died, unfortunately, in a tragic fire, and his son followed him to Congress. So my dad actually grew up partly in Washington, D.C., and partially in Minnesota. Hence, I don't have descendants immediately here. But when I moved to Madison in early 1987, my mother, who came from an Irish farm in Minnesota, said, Katie, watch out. They might know how to say your name in Madison. So this Qualley, like Q-U. And sure enough, my first couple of years in Madison, I'd do a credit card. Oh, are you a Qualley from Orfordville? Or oh, do you know the Qualleys? Well, I know Orfordville's something way back there, but that's what. But I met a few people who know how to say my name. It was amazing. I only had heard about Orfordville because Dad moved to Benson, Minnesota after D.C. So out of the blue, about 1.5 years ago, I get an email from my niece who got an email from a sister-in-law who got an email from Lyle. So Orfordville to St. Paul to me. My niece Mary said, do you know anything about Orfordville? And I said, I think so, I'm not sure. So we developed this communication. Lyle and myself and a brother who wasn't able to come, and my niece, and another sister-in-law who actually is of Norwegian extraction and has learned more about my family than I have. Hence, 1.5 years of correspondence, and this, I just can't tell you how wonderful this gathering is. I walked into the church yesterday, and what do I see but quilts? And I quilt. And I also quilt for shelters in Madison, and we give the quilts anonymously to families and women. So immediately there was a bond. And everyone I've met is so wonderful. So I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for including me. I found some roots in Orfordville that had been sort of left behind in Minnesota, and I'm back. And I have here the eulogies of my grandfather after he died. I think it was 29. Yeah, he was 20. My dad was 22, so he was young. And so these are the eulogies in Congress that I have the original copy of. Isn't that just absolutely stunning? I just told, thank you. And you have an exchange with Chalice and Patton
Yeah,
that my grandfather used serving communion that I took communion from today.
yeah.
So I just want to thank you so much. Thank you for saying my name correctly. So I do have to leave after a bit because I have another commitment in midday in Madison. But thank you so much for your warmth, hospitality, Bernice, Lyle, Andy, and all the Malkasons, yeah, that we connected with and had stories to share, and the music and the celebration and fellowship has just been wonderful. So thank you.
Okay, I'm going through my head now trying to see if there's anyone else who is scheduled to speak. I see someone pointing at Darcy for that.
No.
No, I'm just kidding. If not, feel free to stick around. I think there's still food out there. Go in peace. Thank you all so very, very much.